The knife was still covered in buttercream when she pointed it. "This is my day!" It took 9 months and a hospital room to finally find out.
My sister aimed a cake knife at my pregnant belly and screamed, "This is my day!" 9 months later. The knife was still covered in buttercream when she pointed it at my stomach. My sister was screaming, "This is my day!" And nobody in that bakery, including me, understood what was actually happening. It took 9 months and a hospital room to finally find out. Everyone froze. The baker froze. My mother froze. I remember instinctively stepping backward, my hands moving over my stomach before my brain had even caught up to what was happening. For the next several months, nobody in my family wanted to talk about it either. It would take 9 more months, and a hospital room neither of us ever expected to be standing in together before I finally understood what that knife was really about, and why the sister I'd been close to my entire life had turned toward me in that moment, like I was the source of something she couldn't survive. My name doesn't matter for this story, so let's just say I'm Claire. I'm 34 years old, and my younger sister, Layla, is 31. We grew up 3 years apart, close enough that people constantly assumed we were best friends before they realized we were sisters. We shared a room until I was 14. We told each other everything, or at least I always believed we did. Layla met her fiancé, Marcus, about 4 years ago. Watching their relationship develop was one of the genuine joys of my adult life. When he proposed, I cried almost as hard as she did. I got married myself a year before Layla's engagement to a man named Daniel. When I found out I was pregnant with our first child last year, it landed, entirely by coincidence, about 3 months before Layla's own wedding date. I felt a flicker of anxiety myself about the timing, the ordinary worry that a visibly pregnant sister might pull attention from her wedding. I had no idea how much smaller my worry was compared to what Layla was quietly carrying underneath every wedding planning conversation that year. The cake tasting was supposed to be a small, happy errand. Just Layla, our mother, Marcus, and me, sampling flavors at a bakery Layla had dreamed about since she was a teenager. I was 7 months pregnant, tired, trying to stay in the background so the day could belong entirely to her. About 20 minutes in, the baker made an offhand comment, meant kindly, about how exciting it was to have a pregnant sister there too, joking about a baby shower cake soon. It was nothing, the kind of comment people make constantly around pregnant women. Layla's face changed instantly. She picked up the cake knife on the table, still smeared with buttercream, and pointed it directly at my stomach. "This is my day," she screamed, loud enough that the entire bakery went silent. Marcus grabbed her wrist, guiding the knife down, saying her name over and over like he was trying to pull her back from somewhere. I stepped back instinctively, hands over my belly, before any conscious thought had formed. My mother called that evening, not to ask if I was okay, but to ask me to let it go before the wedding. She said Layla was under enormous stress, that a moment of frustration shouldn't define her. Marcus texted a brief apology on Layla's behalf. Layla herself didn't call at all. Not that night, not the next day. I sat with the strange experience of being the person who was threatened, while somehow becoming the person expected to manage everyone else's comfort about it. I told myself it was pre-wedding stress boiling over, an explanation that satisfied everyone else in my family far more easily than it satisfied me. At the wedding, 6 weeks later, I was 8.5 months pregnant, and Layla seated me toward the back, away from the head table, away from most of the photos. I told myself I understood. A bride not wanting a pregnant belly competing with her dress in every picture. Marcus checked on me privately, twice, a gesture that felt like an unspoken apology on Layla's behalf, one she never actually offered herself, even as I watched her glow through nearly every hour of her own celebration. I left the reception early. Driving home, Daniel asked if I was okay. I told him I felt like I'd spent the whole day watching my sister's wedding through glass, present in the room but somehow not fully invited into it. After the wedding, the distance widened. Layla stopped responding to most of my messages, especially anything related to the pregnancy. When I posted an ultrasound in our family group chat, every relative responded except her. My mother kept discouraging me from bringing up the knife directly, insisting it would only create tension. I spent my final weeks of pregnancy increasingly hurt, unable to reconcile the sister I'd shared a bedroom with, the one who'd cried happy tears at my wedding, with the person who'd pointed a knife at me and then disappeared. I went into labor 2 weeks early. What began as routine turned complicated fast. My blood pressure spiked dangerously, serious enough that Daniel made frantic calls to family while I was rushed in for an emergency C-section. I don't remember much clearly, only fragments. Daniel's hand gripping mine before I went under. What I learned afterward is that Layla was the second person to arrive at the hospital, right behind our mother. She stayed in that waiting room the entire time, refusing to leave. Daniel told me later she paced for nearly 4 hours, barely speaking, checking the doors every time a nurse walked through. Far more frightened, he said, than ordinary family worry usually looks. When I woke up, my daughter safe in the NICU for routine monitoring, Layla was sitting alone in my recovery room, just the two of us for the first real time in almost a year. She was crying before I even fully opened my eyes. She told me everything she'd been hiding since before her engagement. She and Marcus had been quietly struggling with infertility for nearly 3 years. Multiple failed rounds of treatment she'd told almost no one about, convinced saying it out loud would make the grief more real than she could bear. Watching my pregnancy unfold, effortless and unplanned, right alongside her own wedding planning, had cracked something open in her she couldn't control. Not because she didn't love me, but because she couldn't stop comparing my life to the one she was quietly grieving. The cake knife moment wasn't about the wedding at all. It was 3 years of silent grief finally breaking through, aimed at the person who represented everything she was terrified she might never have. I didn't have a neat response ready. Part of me was still hurt, but watching my sister finally say what she'd carried for 3 years in the room where I'd just delivered the child she was grieving never having herself, something in me softened faster than I expected. I told her I wished she'd trusted me sooner. She said she knew that now, that hiding it had only isolated her from the one person who might have actually understood. Layla and Marcus are pursuing a new round of treatment now, with our whole family finally aware, able to show up for her the way none of us could when she carried it alone. My daughter is 5 months old. Layla visits almost every week, closer to me now than she's been in years. It isn't perfectly healed. Some of it still sits between us quietly, but it's honest now, and that's made all the difference. Real family isn't the people who never hurt you. It's the people who eventually let you see the truth and show up once you both do. If this story moved you, let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.